The Curmudgeon Rock Report. Curmudgeon rhymes with bludgeon. Rock gods do it right. So do rock nerds. We're here for the rock. 1965, 2021, doesn't matter. Crude, rude, yet somehow sophisticated. Welcome. Enjoy the show.
Arturo Andrade, dispatch from Christopher O'Connor. How's it going there in South Korea?
I'm doing great. Yeah. I want to do a shout out to two authors, and they're related to the episode we're going to do today. The first author, he's a music journalist by the name of Greg Prado, and I just finished reading a book by his, published in 2009, called Grunge is Dead, The Oral History of Seattle Rock Music. Really, really good. Just finished it, and I just started reading another book about, it's also an oral history of Seattle rock music. It's by Mark Yarm. It's called Everybody Loves Our Town, A History of Grunge. Also an oral history, and I just started reading it, but it's a little more in-depth than Greg Prado's book, which is really good. But this one, the one that I just started reading, is really in-depth. It's longer, and he interviews more people. So if you're really interested in really good oral histories of the 1990s rock revolution, I recommend these two books.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the parallel universe, which is much better than the actual universe. Here, we, Christopher O'Connor and Arturo Andrade of the Curmudgeon Rock Report, we get to program the radio. We get to book the shows for the venue. We run Clear Channel, now Live Nation. We are the tastemakers. And so here, we get to tell you what is hot and what is awesome. That is not Olivia Rodrigo.
Thank God.
And and it comes on our newspapers. We don't care about Britney Spears' conservatorship and apparent ongoing mental illness. We care about great bands and great music that should have a larger profile than it does. Arturo, what are you exploring in the parallel universe this week?
Oh man, right now, this album is probably my choice so far for album of the year. He's a hip hop artist by the name of Genesis Owusu, and it's his debut album called Smiling with No Teeth. Now this dude, he was born in Ghana, but he was raised in Canberra, Australia after his family moved there when he was 2 years old. Now, this album is generally and nominally hip-hop, but it is an intoxicatingly, I love that adjective, intoxicatingly original and fresh blend of hip-hop that incorporates classic 1970s soul, R&B, funk, and electro-tinged indie rock. No, it's not like The Weeknd, because Owusu doesn't delve into retro 80s synth pop pastiche, and he's a much better rapper and lyricist, and just overall better musician. So think Prince meets Damon Albarn's Gorillaz meets Outkast, and all put through a slam-banging hip-hop grinder.
Yeah, don't forget Bambaataa.
Yeah, a little bit of Africa Bambaataa in here as well.
Yep.
Standout tracks include Whipcracker. This is an anti-racism track. It's also a single that starts out with an intense 4/4 beat and kind of a rap flow, kind of reminiscent of the late DMX. And then midway through, the song unpredictably evolves into like sweaty disco funk. Another great song is Gold Chains, which is another of the singles from the album. And it kind of takes TV on the radio's inventive synth rock and injects it with hip hop juice, installing a badass bass groove and soulful gospelish background vocals. So I highly recommend this album. It is, as like I said, as of now, it's my choice for #1 album of the year.
Spit up on your grave, hold my thoughts behave, we so depraved. Spit up on your grave, hold my thoughts behave, we so depraved. Hope your soul is saved, we gon' hold your faith. Hope your soul is saved, we gon' hold your faith. Look into the eyes of your master, tell me if you still got the answer. If you pour my ass to the pastor, better go Casper for a disaster. Why you asking why I'm so jaded? Who forgot your thoughts on the races? Mammy got the crumbs from your faces, fed all your babies, still cup the races. You a woman beater, but you still want respect. Fuck a bet, sit your ass in prison, sucker, you get checked. I digress, goofy motherfucker, slipping, you get slept. Hope you wept, you ain't getting safe.
It begins, you would think it's from Bambaata's 1982 catalog. It hits, has that kind of Arthur Baker hit or feel to it. But then, he goes all over the place. Gold Chains has this wonderful kind of almost like RZA-ish, if that's a descriptor, bass thing going on and real texture to it. So, it's pretty exciting, but it shows you how hard you have to work to find the good hip hop these days.
Yep.
Because it's an Aussie with his African given name that is basically doing it better and way better than they're doing it here in America. And like I said, there's a couple of folks, Vince Staples and a couple of guys in Detroit like Danny Brown, and there's a few people that are still doing some compelling stuff. But it doesn't get much more compelling than this these days. So good call, dude. Okay, so I'm in the parallel universe again, and turns out that there is one band that might actually live in the parallel universe to the point where I'm beginning to think that we should replace the intro music to this segment with excerpts from their songs. I'm talking about King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. If that sounds
for the second time this year.
Yes. If that sounds familiar, we covered an album of theirs, about 5-6 episodes ago.
Yeah.
At that time, King Gizzard is one of these bands. We've said on this podcast several times that there's something to be said for the gatekeeper function that has been lost in this era of music distribution.
Quality control.
Yes, because it saves us from the shit. But King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, they actually are, at the very least, they consistently put out interesting records. Records that don't sound like they were masturbating in a cup. They're not Bob Pollard, and they're not
John Darnielle.
Or John Darnielle. Sorry, John. Or any bands like that they actually can pivot between styles and actually get really good records out of them. Let me take you through this sequence. So a couple years back, they released this wonderful thrash metal inspired record called Infest the Rat's Nest, which is a concept record about unlivable Earth where we all have to move to Planet B. It's such a bad planet, it doesn't even have a real name. I guess that makes Earth Planet A. But it's thrash metal. It's totally Metallica inspired. It has the crunch, it has the solos, it has the structures. And it was one of the best records of that year. Earlier this year, they switched back to what they've been calling their series of microtonal records with LW. Which preceded the album KG. Get it? They think they're clever sometimes. And LW was this mix of, like it said, microtonal, Middle Eastern inspired songs with differing tempos and differing styles, but generally speaking, a very good math rock record that brought up the themes of ecology and spirituality and some of the go-tos that are common with King Gizzard and Lizard Wizard. Now, here we are, like, what is it, like 3 or 4 months later, and King Gizzard, as is their wont, has released yet another record, which they recorded during COVID lockdown in Australia, which did have a COVID lockdown. This one is called Butterfly 3000. True to its title, this is another concept record. And yes, it is in some ways about metamorphosis and floating free into the better space, whether it's dreams, whether it's heaven, whether it's on drugs or whatever you would want to call it. So there you have it. It's freedom from the darkness, and you're living in the wonderland. Well, Stu McKenzie, you could call it indulgent. I think it's very, very, very smart. Not quite brilliant, but it's very, very smart. It says, okay, well, I'm doing this album about, floating into dreams and into heaven and breaking free from the internal chains. That sounds like an electro pop record, or that should get an electro pop accompaniment. And so now here we have synth pop, and not synth rock, synth pop. That gets these treatments. It gets falsetto from Stu McKenzie. It gets harmonies, ostensibly of McKenzie. Arturo made a comment to me earlier in the week that maybe this could have been a Stu McKenzie solo project, which, is true, because, look, you could say that it's indulgent, but I really do like what they've done here. Some of the lyrics, this is really just sort of indicative of the theme of the record when Stu sings. It gets better, gets crazy when you can literally be out of your skin, floating above who you have been. It gets better. So again, this is all meant to encapsulate the wonder of the out of body experience.
I'll keep my response very brief. This album fucking sucks. I think it's one of the worst in Gizzard's entire catalog. At the very least, they're worst since that album from 2016. That was the one continual loop record, which I never was a fan of. But to me, it's just way too many awkward vocal phrasings, way too many dissonant chord progressions, all wrapped up in a package of just cheesy, phony craft work. is the way I reacted to this. I heard it. I gave this album 2 listens. It sucked the first time, and it got worse the second time I heard it. No. And like I always said, this is a testament to what I've always said. There's such a thing as being overly prolific, and there's something to be said for quality control. And like I told you before, Chris, this should have been a Stu McKenzie solo record. To put the King Gizzard name on this kind of dilutes the King Gizzard brand a little bit, in my opinion. I think it's cool that a band experiments and tries new things and new sounds, but just because they do it doesn't mean it's always good.
We are now leaving the universe, and let us get into the meat of this episode, which we have titled The Dregs of Nirvana. Arturo, what is this all about?
All right. Well, several weeks ago, we did an episode called Death by Nirvana, in which you and I, Chris, did a survey of the carnage of bands whose careers were either drastically altered forever or just destroyed, thankfully, by the alt-rock revolution spearheaded by Nirvana. Well, to follow that up, on this episode, we will scour the rock landscape from the mid-1990s all the way through the decade of the 2000s, otherwise known as the noughties, in order to torture ourselves and painfully reminisce on all the terrible bands that came in the wake of grunge and expedited the demise of rock radio, at least in the US, with their derivative drivel. It's important to note that it wasn't just Nirvana that inspired this nonstop shower of shit, however. Corny, watered-down versions of Pearl Jam and Alice in Chains as well were actually significant. Some of these bands spent significant amounts of record label money doing bastardized, corny, watered-down versions of Pearl Jam and Alice in Chains as well. It's also important to note that this wasn't just a phenomenon of fuckery that lasted a few years. The unending American appetite for phony grunge and phony alternative rock lasted at least 10 years, probably a little more, which means it's a forgettable era that lasted longer than the real grunge era itself.
Way longer.
Sad state of affairs.
Yeah.
It seems that for more than a decade, the mainstream of American rock music fans liked their quote-unquote rock and roll honesty draped either in macho posturing, whiny self-pity, or overwrought Christian imagery. Yeah, we're looking at you, Creed. We're about to take a masochistic walk down memory lane and pick out the worst of wannabe grunge, wannabe alternative rock, and overall, the worst of commercial rock radio from the mid-1990s onward. Yum.
Yeah. Well said. Yum is in, yeah, we like the taste of vomit. Let me just give you a few of my own thoughts on this. Nirvana was so good and so important that they inspired us to dedicate 2 episodes to really bad bands on both sides of their time and place in rock history. Cobain, Novoselic, and Grohl's time and place in history really is a line of demarcation. They exposed the limitations and the unforgivable sins of a lot of popular bands that preceded them. And then they inspired a bunch of bands that tried to capture the magic of Nirvana and their grunge peers and were shockingly and unforgivably embraced by quote-unquote alternative rock fans, basically for their own limitations and sins. Look, things were so bad there for a while that we don't even have room on our list for this episode to include Third Eye Blind or Collective Soul.
Oh, fuck yeah, they were really bad.
Yeah. But, we need to have some fairness here and give you a reminder that not all of the Seattle Laden Love was bad. Here's a roll call of some of the bands of that era that became popular, but also basically got it right. 3 that come to mind are Local H, Garbage, which shouldn't be a surprise since Butch Vig was their band leader, and then Everclear. You may disagree with me on that last one, but Father of Mine is a genuine classic hard rock song. Love it. And then also there's a few great bands and singles out there that may never have hit the public's consciousness or radar if not for Nirvana. That roll call includes Weezer, Fountains of Wayne, Hum, who's one of their leaders just died, the Toadies, L7, and then 2 singles that immediately came to mind for me, Semisonic's Closing Time and Joan Osborne's One of Us. So you may not have gotten any of that from that era and afterwards if it was not for Nirvana. And then it's also worth mentioning that it helped Mike Ness achieve some mainstream success with Social Distortion, given I Was Wrong, which was a 1997 hit, was one of the best rock radio singles of the decade. And Bruce Springsteen was a fan. So anyway, those are my thoughts leading into this.
The 1990s were the 4th golden age of rock. I'm stealing that term from Arturo because I wholeheartedly agree. It's a perfect way to describe the era. Why do we make that argument? Find out soon. The Curmudgeon Rock Report will be basing an entire series of episodes on the topic. From Lollapalooza, the good kind of shoegazing, and grunge, all the way through to EDM, mook rock, and Napster, we'll cover the spectrum of a beautiful, incredible span of time where everything changed. At first for the better, and ultimately perhaps for the much worse. What defined the 1990s for you? Let us know at curmudgeonrock@gmail.com.
All right. So now we're going to do the countdown of the 10, actually a little bit more than 10 because we cheated. The worst fake, phony, bullshit, alternative grunge bands from the mid 1990s onward that polluted rock radio with their shittiness. And number 10 is one of our 3 multi-band groupings. I like to call it the one-hit division of suck ass wannabe grunge. Chris, take it away.
Okay. Yep. And this was a considerable division, honestly, basically starting in 1996. The apotheosis or the center of this was 96, 97, and 98. So indicative of the main sin committed by these artists as a collective, they ran with the drama and the sarcasm and the surface angst, not the actual evident pain or the wit or the textured, nuanced worldviews that targeted ambiguity and the dangers of losing your soul or your family or the love of your life acutely. That was the accomplishment of the best of, I guess, quote unquote, Seattle bands and some of the other bands that immediately preceded everybody. Now, the Curmudgeon Rock Report Grand Grunge Facsimile Award goes to Seven Mary 3 for its inescapably reverent and dumb hit, Cumbersome.
Oh.
Now, I will admit that I liked this song when I was a junior in college in 1995, 96, whenever this piece of crap
Well,
was
it
there.
does lend itself to frat house stupidity.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways it does. And yes, I love my friend Stu Morians, even though I don't talk to him that much, but he's the one that turned me on to this. And yes, when you're 20 and you're inept with women, some of these lyrics might resonate. And, the opening line, she calls me Goliath and I wear the David mask. I guess the stones are coming too fast for her now. One, it's like, dude, read the Bible.
Yeah.
Before you're going to do that. And then 2, the guy must have practiced his growl and maybe practiced it in the mirror so he could get the right face to get the right voice.
Yeah.
Because, he sounds awesome and he sounds like he has real conviction. At the time, to me, he seemed like he could be a poor man's Eddie Vedder. Nope, he was just a studio savvy phony, which brings up the neatest trick of this song. This guy sings about being a creepy phony trying to win over a girl. And the song is by a creepy phony band trying to win over a still grunge drunk audience, which it did. And this was a huge alternative rock charts hit. I think it was number 1 for like a month or something. And it was unavoidable. It was depending on where you got your music from, it was as unavoidable as the Alanis Morissette stuff there for about a month or 2 back in that era. So here's an amusing punchline to all this. Now, when I subjected myself to that shit on Spotify, the streaming service segued immediately into Harvey Danger's Flagpole Sitta.
Which is a good song.
I disagree. Look, it's a much better song than Cumbersome, but it's also unbearably phony, grunge ripoff.
Those guys are from Seattle, by the way.
Yes, they are. And Sean Nelson is a pretty prolific music writer, and I met him 20 years ago. Seemed like a good dude, but I just didn't like the song because it was so dumb and so derivative and so slick. And look, when I listen to it, I feel like my IQ points dip into the negative digits. And I'm like this. Okay, so listen to the chorus. I'm not sick, but I'm not well. And I'm so hot because I'm in hell. Well, so am I as a listener. Shut the fuck up. So otherwise, here's a roll call of other bands that belong in this category. The Verve Pipe, handsome, depressed-looking guy spitting out over-the-top sad lyrics. Tonic, which was a very good band technically, but was boring. Then you had Sponge, In a World of Human Wreckage. Yep, that's where they generated all this horse shit from. Our Lady Peace. They don't merit comment. Deep Blue Something. Whatever. Breakfast at Tiffany's. They desecrated the grave of Truman Capote by naming that song Breakfast at Tiffany's. Sean Mullins. He be mulling over how much he sucks. Eve Six. Ick. Four Non-Blondes, even though they were a little bit earlier than this. Look, Linda Perry, the leader of that band, went on to write and produce hits for Christina Aguilera and Pink, so that gives you all you need to know there. And then, my personal, this one makes me smile, Primitive Radio Gods.
Yes.
Awful band. Dude looked the part, but he had a terrible real name, Christopher O'Connor. So we go from these one-hit wonders to a band that unfortunately had a little bit higher profile than that, even though they really, really, really shouldn't have. What do you got?
Okay, well, here's what this band is. Hey, guys, let's replicate Alice in Chains' Sap and Jar of Flies EPs, extend it to an entire album, and let's push our handsome lead singer up front to take up as much camera space as possible for the videos. Oh, yeah, and let's make sure he's shirtless all the time, so it evokes the brooding sexiness of Chris Cornell. That's essentially the rationale behind Days of the New.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, and you're absolutely right about that.
Yeah, a band that basically flared up briefly in the late 1990s before egomania, drugs, and overall awful music derailed their brief career. All right, let's give a brief history of this crappy band. The four members of this band formed in 1994 in Charlestown, Indiana, when they were still in high school. They were a supposed groove metal band originally called Dead Reckoning before they decided to do their acoustic grunge shtick, and they changed their name. They only played a few shows in the Louisville area in 1996, because that town in Indiana is very close to Kentucky.
Right.
Before they were discovered by Scott Litt, the well-known producer who worked with REM and Nirvana. And I don't know why he liked these guys, but he did. And I
guess Travis was a charismatic chap.
Yeah. And they were signed to Outpost Records, an indie label that had major label distribution. Their self-titled debut album came out in 1997, and lo and behold, they had some hits. Touch, Peel, and Stand, their most well-known song, was number one on the modern rock chart for 17 fucking weeks. Other songs, The Downtown and Shelf in the Room, peaked at number one and number three, respectively, in the same chart. And the album went platinum, which for you kiddies out there means it sold 1 million copies. The problem, the album fucking sucked.
Yes, it did. Look, the single, if you heard it like maybe 3 or 4 times, okay, pretty good. At least they had some talent. When you have to hear it 5 or 6 times a day, look, I was, back then I was in my car a quarter of the day, on, getting back and forth to newspaper assignments. But every fucking time I was in the goddamn car, that song was on, and so it's just like, go away.
It sucked, and it got overplayed. And in addition to the music being a shameless ripoff of acoustic Alice in Chains. And seriously, you can imagine these guys watching Alice in Chains' unplugged performance on MTV in 96 and taking notes. You can just visualize it.
Yes, you can.
The songs are just one monotonous, somber, self-pitying mope fest after another. Melodies are scarce and hooks are even scarcer. The lesson that all these crap bands trying to ape Alice in Chains don't learn is that the secret to Alice in Chains' greatness was not their dark and heavy sound. It was the fact that Jerry Cantrell and Lane Staley were really, really good songwriters.
Absolutely.
And they had great sense for melody and dynamics within the music that kept it from getting tedious. I'm going to quote Robert Christgau, and this is a great one, in his review of Days of the New. Quote, "As marketing, it's pure genius. It looks like alt country and it has no electric guitars even, yet it is actually America's answer to Silverchair. And hey, it's sincere. 17-year-old Heartland frontman Travis Meeks really is depressed, really has immersed in Soundgarden, really does think it's deep to hook your single to the all-purpose trope of abuse. This is why grown-ups need Hanson. This is also why they need Radish." End quote. I love Christgau.
Christgau comes up with some good lines. Although my favorite line about Christgau is the dude from Soul Coughing. It says that Robert Christgau gets paid to write about his mail, which is meant as an insult. But hey, that sounds like a good fucking job to me.
Yeah.
Anyway, the only thing I have to add is that of all the, we call this the Dregs of Nirvana, but you could do a much longer, broader episode and list about the Dregs of Alice in Chains, because there were every other band, and I can't even remember half their names, and I try to take them out of my mind. But you listen to active rock these days, and every other band is a Alice in Chains ripoff, which was funny because then a few years back, I'm driving on the road and a song comes on, and I immediately knew within 5 seconds that was the real Alice in Chains.
Yeah.
with a new lead singer. And so, because look, you can try to ape it, you can try to model it, you can try to run with the formula, but Jerry Cantrell, if it's that good and that original, you're not going to hit it. Where do you think we're going next, Arturo?
Where we're going next, a band that may be even worse than Days of the New.
Yeah, basically they're worse than everyone. I'm keeping this very, very short.
Yes,
because this is the kind of band that leads itself to poetry from the writer's soul. I say that tongue in cheek, but it's actually kind of true. Puddle of Mudd, which, as you know, came 0203. They're basically a two-hit wonder.
And by the way, this is one of two bands we have Fred Durst to thank for.
Yeah, basically, Fred Durst, the Magic A&R man that thrust this band and another one on us. So Puddle of Mudd, Kansas City band. So here's my poem. Puddle of horse shit. Puddle of dog shit. Puddle of Kansas City born rat shit. Led by a guy named Wes. His lyric? Everything's so blurry and everyone's so fake. And everyone's empty and everyone is so messed up. So are you, motherfucker. Enough said.
Yeah. This is a terrible lyricist, terrible songwriter. Good God.
Yeah, but hey, good looking guy who could wear his cap backwards and look cool while he was doing that. And then of course they're more famous for the song She Fucking Hates Me, or I don't know if the fucking is in the title, but that's what it's known for. I remember taking a ride to a Rolling Stones concert with the general counsel of the newspaper I was working for the time. While he was smoking a joint, he was in his mid-50s wearing cowboy boots, and the guy was singing lovely, lustily, and gleefully along to She Hates Me. So that tells you all you need to know. Now we travel from Puddle of Mudd, we go back a decade to a band that could actually be worse than Puddle of Mudd.
I think they kind of... Well, no, you know what? No, they're both equally bad.
Well, they're more offensive. Candlebox is more offensive.
Yeah. We're making a list of shitty fake grunge bands, but ironically enough, Candlebox actually hails from Seattle.
And we're contemporaries.
They formed in 1990. They slogged around the clubs and bars. Candlebox, by the way, officially they're number 7 on the list, just to let you know. They slogged around the clubs and bars of the Seattle music scene for a couple of years until they were spotted and inexplicably liked by some A&R guy from Maverick Records. Now, Maverick, for those who don't know, was a subsidiary of Warner Brothers that was founded by none other than Madonna. So Candlebox, believe it or not, was the beginning of Maverick Records' hot streak of releases that included Alanis Morissette, the Deftones, and the Prodigy. So Candlebox started this thing for Madonna.
Yeah, go figure.
I know. Their self-titled debut was released in July of 1993, but it took a while for the album to catch on. By the end of the year and throughout 94, the Warner Brothers publicity machine made sure it got annoyingly ubiquitous on rock radio, with 3 songs, You, Far Behind, and Cover Me, hitting the top 10 of the modern rock chart, with Far Behind especially peaking at number 18 in the Billboard Pop chart. Now, that's quite a lot of success for a band that produced the blandest, most unmemorable, most watered-down version of shit grunge to date. Same sounding is an adjective, or another adjective I would like to use to describe the band's music. All Candlebox songs, at least on their quote-unquote classic debut album, start off with a lilting, softly picked arpeggio, then build up to plodding mid-tempo heaviness with singer Kevin Martin belting out his simplistic lyrics with an overwrought wannabe grunge howl that resembles Eddie Vedder, only if Vedder's balls were caught in a bear trap. I've given a lot of adjectives, but if I had to choose one to describe Candlebox's music, is this: generic. Funk Turkey, who has become a star on YouTube. Yes, folks, his YouTube name is Funk Turkey.
And he's great.
He's great. He's become famous, kind of famous, for putting several songs by a particular artist / band into a quote-unquote bot. Really, it's a computer program. Then having the system's algorithm create a generic, typical song of that band. The results have often been hilarious, with AC/DC, Metallica, Led Zeppelin, and many others getting the Funk Turkey treatment.
Yeah.
Folks, go on YouTube and check out Funk Turkey.
Yeah, the AC/DC one is wonderful.
Yeah, that one's perfect. Now, back to Candlebox. If you get every song by every grunge band imaginable, put them into Funk Turkey's system, ask it to create a generic grunge sound, and I swear to God, the machine will come up with something that sounds like Candlebox. Generic, same sounding, unmemorable, and unfortunately lacking in the humor that other Funk Turkey productions have. Now, Candlebox released their follow-up, Lousy, in 1995 to much less success than their debut. Their third album, Happy Pills, came out in 1998 and sold even less than the second album. The band thankfully disbanded in 2000. Since 2008, though, Kevin Martin, the lead singer, has led various incarnations of the band with a revolving door lineup featuring just him as the constant member. Since 2008, they've put out 3 albums that have done practically nothing. Up until the pandemic hit, the Kevin Martin Band, which is pretty much what Candlebox is now, they continue to tour. But does anyone even care? And is there such a thing as Candlebox fans? Like, really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah, I know. I don't have much more to add to that, although all these years I really thought I knew the definition of the word classic.
Yeah.
So I'm now just utterly confused. And so what follows from classic here? Shallowness, vapid, half in, half out tunes, or tunefulness or tunelessness, vomit. Don't know. So let us move on.
Speaking of the next band, that of all the bands, why did they choose this one? Chris, take it away. Number 6.
So here's your reintroduction to Silverchair. Now, let's go through this step by step and bullet point by bullet point. First, they were an Aussie trio of kids, all in their mid-teens. The lead singer, Daniel Johns, was a Kurt Cobain lookalike with an eating disorder. Now, for real, the guy actually did have an eating disorder, which he disclosed in the late 90s, which was unfortunately a very 1990s teenage life affliction. They actually named an album Frog Stomp. Settle down, Beavis. But here's the thing. They also did have the talent to ape Pearl Jam's sound and also Nirvana's soft, loud arrangement tendencies, which, sounds wonderful in theory. You put it on record and it's like, what the?
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, like listen to the songs Israel's Son and try not to roll your eyes so far back into your head that you get a clear view of your cerebral cortex. Now, here's a lyric from that song.
Oh, God.
I want you to know that I want you dead. Now, gee, did they ever hear of a Nirvana tune called I Hate Myself and Want to Die? Wow. It's amazing how inspired you can be. Now, the kid, obviously he didn't kill himself. He had the anorexia. He didn't kill himself. But two kids that did kill themselves somewhere sued the band for apparently pulling in Ozzy Judas Priest with this song. Can't remember exactly what happened to that, but be that as it may, at least, hey, if you're going to be notorious, you might as well be notorious in multiple ways. So Silverchair, yeah, they had their moment. They also strangely got critical applause.
Unbelievable that they actually that first album, like, hey, they're teenagers. Come on, give them a break. It's like, fuck off.
No. It wasn't even apologism. It wasn't even that kind of stuff. It wasn't glad handing. It actually was praise. There were, MTV put them in the same boat as Green Day as like the next big thing. They got good press and spin and positive reviews, and folks like the couple of singles from Frog Stomp, and and they did sell some records. They got themselves on some big tours. They had a 6 or 7 year streak consistently as a big opening act for big bands, and they made it through until 2011, which is pretty funny because when Daniel Johns put out the statement, he referred to it as an indefinite hibernation. Does a bear shit in the woods? Sure. Does Silverchair shed in a hibernation tuck? Absolutely. They have not reemerged, and as of last year, John said he had no interest in reforming the band because it wasn't fun anymore. Look, it was a band that he formed when he was 12. Now he's in his 30s. Life goes on. However, Silverchair does not. It is still there. Occasionally, they've actually kind of faded from the regular rotation of the rock stations here in the U.S. They're still big, I guess, in Australia, at least as a classic rock, quote unquote, staple. But yeah, I never got it. These guys were as synthetic leather as it gets.
No shit. Look like Nirvana, sound like Pearl Jam. Let's make some money.
On this episode, we took a gigantic Melvin's riff-sized dump on all the inexcusably crappy, phony, fake grunge and alternative rock bands that littered the rock landscape for more than a decade. For this next episode, Chris and I will take a different tack. We're taking the concept of our parallel universe segment and extrapolating it to an entire episode. We're going to count down the 20, that's right, not the 10, the 20 greatest bands / artists in modern rock. And by greatest, we mean the bands, artists who, in a better parallel universe version of Earth where rock music is still a dominant genre and good taste prevailed, would be commercially successful, selling out arenas, and garnering all kinds of mainstream media attention. The Curmudgeons will give shout-outs to Ty Segall, Courtney Barnett, King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, Emil and the Sniffers, and several more. Email us at curmudgeonrock@gmail.com or hit us on Twitter at @curmudgeonpod.
And now we come to the number 5 entry that we lovingly call the Massachusetts division of suck-ass wannabe grunge, as Stained hail from Springfield, Massachusetts, and Godsmack come from Lawrence, Massachusetts.
Yep, and this one pains me because my father's family is from Springfield, Massachusetts, and I lived there for 2 years.
Right, and these two bands are classified as nu metal. You know, the subgenre that Korn practically invented with their debut album back in 1994. But if you sit down and listen to their music, they really aren't new. They are not nu metal at all. Stained basically take a huge slab of a dose of Alice in Chains, put a little Tool in there, and come up with a totally nondescript, more boring, far less inspired hybrid that lacks the immediacy, the sophistication, and the songwriting skills of the latter two bands. Godsmack literally named themselves after an Alice in Chains song, and frontman Sully Erna has been, credit to him, honest about how much they've musically taken from Alice in Chains. Basically Godsmack are Alice in Chains without the intelligence and with more lunk-headed aggression.
I'll get into this more, but Sully's got a little bit more intelligence than you might give him credit for at first.
Oh, I'm sure he's a smart guy, but it doesn't come across in the music.
Well, but even some of the music's not that bad in terms of its intelligence. Is it great music? Yeah. No, but there's a few smart things going on. But go ahead.
Well, I guess that lunk-headed aggression is what keeps them nu metal.
Yeah.
Whatever. The maddeningly perplexing thing about these two bands is how they've been able to maintain mass popularity in the US for the most part, with their albums consistently charting in the Billboard Top 10. Stained until their self-imposed hiatus in 2013, and Godsmack's most recent album from 3 years ago charting as high as number 8. So let's start with Stained very briefly. They started in 1995 as a covers band, covering mostly, surprise, surprise, Pearl Jam, Alice in Chains, and Tool. They self-released their debut album in late 96, and they got their big break a year later opening for Limp Bizkit when Bizkit were touring for their first album. Supposedly, Fred Durst was so impressed with them that he got them signed to Flip Records, an indie label specializing in atrocious heavy metal bands that had distribution deals with several major labels. Yes, again, we have Fred Durst to thank for unleashing another shitty band onto the world. Their second album, Dysfunction, came out in 1999 and had moderate chart success, both album-wise and singles-wise. They did a lot of touring with some really shitty big-name nu metal bands, and they grew their fan base. They hit pay dirt in 2001, though, with their third album, Break the Cycle, which spawned the international smash hit ballads It's Been a While and the acoustic Outside. Now, I'll admit, It's Been a While may be their only good song. Even I will admit to liking it a little bit. However, in the end, it basically sounds like an Alice in Chains outtake from Dirt.
Yeah.
With the chord progressions, the vocal delivery, the self-pitying lyrics, all being grunge tropes that by 2001 were already cliche.
Yeah. Well, cliche on top of cliche on top of cliche by then.
Yeah. Afterward, they never had a song that was nearly as big of a hit as It's Been a While, but over time, they unbelievably became a classic AOR band. 2 more albums, 2003's 14 Shades of Grey and 2005's Chapter 5, inexplicably went to number one with their hot streak ending in '08, with The Illusion of Progress debuting at number 3. Their last self-titled and pre-hiatus album went as high as number 8. I said inexplicably, but I kind of guess it is explicable. I guess there really is an unlimited appetite in America for big, beefy guys with tattoos bellowing in baritone voices about their feelings and their vulnerability.
This will never end because they all want to be Pete Steele.
Yeah, pretty much. Up next, and much more briefly, Godsmack. Like Stained, they were formed in 1995, but under the name The Scam by Sully Erna. They changed their name to Godsmack after recording a demo. For the next 2 years, they were pretty much a staple of the Boston club scene, and they, like Stained, self-recorded their first album. We have Boston radio station WAAF to thank for bringing exposure to Godsmack with the song Keep Away, getting heavy rotation until it went to number 1 on the station's chart. This led to a major label deal with Universal Republic Records and the release of their self-titled debut album in 1998, and starting from this point onward, a seemingly permanent place in the playlists of the what I call miasmic shower of shit that is corporate/commercial rock radio in America. Like Stained, the Naughties were very kind to Godsmack, as they also had a streak of 3 consecutive albums hitting number 1 on the Billboard album charts: Faceless in '03, The Oracle in '06, and Roman numeral 4 in 2010. Since their second album, Awake, in 2000, every single Godsmack album has produced at least one song that has gone to number 1 on the modern rock charts. Their most recent album, When Legends Arise, from 3 years ago, had not 1, not 2, not 3, but fucking 4 songs go to number 1 on the modern rock charts.
Yeah.
How bad does modern rock radio have to be in America that derivative, same-sounding macho butt rock like Godsmack is so ubiquitous?
Mm-hmm.
How bad?
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah. No, I know. I mean, look, I mean, I guess I'll keep my comments brief on here. Look, I mean, I guess you could give some damning with faint praise at least to Godsmack in the sense that the song Voodoo was inspired by the movie The Serpent and the Rainbow, which is an underappreciated, lost, weird-ass voodoo horror film. And Sully started as a drummer, and he was a club guy, and he seems like he has bona fides. But yeah, bad bands that, like you said, aped Alice in Chains and other bands, and still gets teary-eyed ballads sung by ostensibly handsome dudes. Although Sully's kind of an ugly fuck, but he has the tattoos anyway. But yeah, there's not much I can say about Stained other than, yes, they're the second band on this list unleashed on the world by Fred Durst. And the version of Outside with Fred Durst singing the song with Aaron Lewis live was the one that became the huge hit and broke Stained. So it's like guilty by association. Look, Durst been very successful. He's done some directing and all of that. And, give it up for him as an entrepreneur. But yeah, as a plague that has still emanated over what's left of rock, Durst is pretty evil. So that's all I have to say.
Speaking of evil, this next band, number 4 on our list, God, do they suck. Well, Chris, take it away.
Yeah, let's just put it this way. This band is so puzzlingly insipid and dull, but unusually ridiculously successful. We had to knock them down a floor for this discussion. So at number 4 comes 3 Doors Down.
Yep.
And unlike a lot of the bands on this record or on this list, 3 Doors Down was really successful for a really long time. starting in 2000, and they haven't released a record since 2016, but they were huge. Multi-platinum records, headlining shows. They do their own festival every year. Not bad for some conservatives from Mississippi. Okay, fine. They have the distinction of being one of those bands that has the cool thing where the drummer is also the vocalist until they get big, and then he has to be out front. A guy named Brad Arnold. God bless him for making so much money off so many bad songs. And not only that, but he may be the most karaoke of all alternative rock post Nirvana, these Dregs singers. That he's just you could just see him at a karaoke bar, singing like Skynyrd and singing Nirvana and singing Sabbath in that sort of, hey, I'm drunk and I'm having fun and dude, isn't this great? Kind of thing. And so there's nothing pleasing about his voice. If it wasn't for that, Kryptonite, which I think to this day is probably still their biggest hit or their most notable song, might not be a bad song. Has a decent little galloping rhythm to it. I guess it was unique enough for them to be put on the radio. And then again, they just took off like a rocket. They did all these albums for almost 16, 17 years. They all sold. They were still headlining. They've done all this, sort of corporate rock stuff. And
they're the most corporate of corporate rock. It's just really.
And not only that, because, remember, these guys are all from Mississippi and Alabama. Their most recent claim to fame was that they played as part of the inaugural celebration concert for Donald Trump.
God, fuck these guys.
Yeah, basically. Keep in mind that, maybe there's a correlation between the fact that they played that show and that they haven't done an album since.
Yeah.
Who knows? Although Wikipedia, which, again, is a surface resource, but a good one, tells me that they embarked on the Rock and Roll Express tour in 2018, along with Collective Soul and opening act Soul Asylum. So essentially, they've now been unmoored from time and put in the eternal bin of money-making phoniness.
Well, anyway, this leads us now to our number 3 band on this list, and these guys are a little older than Three Doors Down. So here's the premise. 4 British guys who had been unsuccessfully kicking around the London music scene for years. They hear Nirvana's Nevermind and find out about this little thing from Seattle called grunge. They say, hey, let's just shamelessly rip that off and push our tall, handsome, former soccer player, lead singer to the forefront. We'll be millionaires. Now, does that sound too contrived and corny to be successful? Well, yes, it was. And the band wasn't really successful anywhere, except for North America. If there's one lesson we're learning in this episode, it's to never underestimate Canadians and Americans' taste for third-rate, derivative, unoriginal, copycat grunge. Yes, this band, Bush, were originally called Future Primitive, and according to an unnamed British former record label executive, quote, they weren't what they are today. They were a little more like the commercial side of INXS. Yes, in the beginning, they were an even poppier version of INXS. Oh boy. All right. Anyway, in 1993, after their name changed to Bush and obviously a radical musical makeover, they got signed to Disney's Hollywood Records. And in early 94, they recorded the songs that would make up their debut album, 16 Stone. Apparently, the folks at Hollywood Records had some good taste. They deemed the album unsuitable for release and instead released the band from their contract. Interscope, however, took a chance and quickly signed them up and released the album in late 1994. K-Rock, the legendary rock station in Los Angeles, is known for breaking many bands into mainstream success. Bush were no exception, as their first single, Everything Zen, was the first of a streak of 5 songs that charted in the top 10 of the modern rock charts. 2 of those songs, Come Down and Glycerine, went as far as the top 30 of the Billboard pop charts. So while grunge pioneers like Mudhoney and Tad were getting fucked over by their major labels, grunge light imposters like Bush were cashing in, and 16 Stone went 6 times platinum. Here's the thing about 16 Stone. When you listen to the album, it's crystal clear that the 5 songs that became the big singles were always planned to be the singles.
Yep.
Those songs are very well produced,
Obviously.
very polished, perfectly mixed for maximum radio impact. The rest of the songs on the album not only aren't anywhere near as good, or quote unquote good, but they aren't as well produced and have almost a demo-like sound quality to them. And, after that album, as if they wanted to signal, hey, we really want to be the next Nirvana, they hired Steve Albini, who produced Nirvana's In Utero, to produce their follow-up Razorblade Suitcase. Predictably, it was basically 16 Stone Part 2 with the same third-rate, watered-down, phony grunge as its successor. Naturally, that album debuted at number 1 in the only 2 countries that gave a shit about Bush, and they had a couple of more top 10 rock radio hits with the awful Swallowed and the terrible Greedy Fly.
Oh, Swallowed is just, ugh.
Yeah.
Oh, it makes me want to shit.
Yeah. This was the end of Bush as a commercial rock force. They put out the, at the time, obligatory dalliance with electronica, The Science of Things, in 1999, and the super-produced, super pro-tooled up Golden State in 2001. Neither album did anything, and Bush broke up in 2002. They reunited in 2010, continued to tour, and have since released 4 albums that no one with good taste really gives a shit about. Chris?
Yeah, I can't do much better than that. Look, Gavin Rossdale lost his woman to Blake Shelton, which I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of jokes that can be made from that. But yeah, look, 16 Stone, if you're not connecting it to its predecessors and forefathers, and you're listening to it in a vacuum, it's a pretty good record. Gavin Rossdale's a decent singer, great production job, like you said. What's his face there, Nigel, was a really, proficient guitarist. And I always liked Come Down, and I always liked Machine Head. But yeah, you're right. But take it out of its vacuum. And yet, no, and I even said it at the time when I first listened to it, when Now and Zen hit the radio, I was like, yeah, okay, these guys are British, but there's no fucking way that they'd ever be in America if it wasn't for grunge. I mean, they wouldn't have a career, so they clearly and calculatedly, and they obviously didn't hide it. They weren't even coy about it. They rode that wave. Hey, why not? More power to them. I mean, Gavin Rossdale and, a lot of those Bush songs, those 5 songs basically are still all on the radio. Some more than others. I think Machine Head's probably the most enduring one. But yeah, and then like you said, then they said, well, if we went for it kind of, sort of cleverly, like, let's really ape the shit out of it and let's bring in Steve Albini. Okay, so fine, you got the Albini song, but man, like I said, it's like somebody took puke to hang up wallpaper. They went away, and so,
right.
which is more than we can say for, I guess, well, like these other bands we're about to talk about, they went away, but they're quote unquote
took a lot longer to go away.
Yeah, and their quote unquote legacy is probably more profound.
Yeah, number 2, and again, we're cheating again. We're putting multiple bands here. Chris, talk to us about the Florida division of suck-ass lightweight grunge.
Why yes. There's a reason that Florida has become so meme-worthy. Not only because of its delectably insane redneckness and just dumb shit that comes out of that involving people getting eaten by alligators and getting caught with meth in their teeth, like literally like trying to smuggle meth in their teeth, kind of stuff. Yeah, and so this kind of comes out of it. It's dumb, it's synthetic, it's ridiculous, and it's just like it turns out that sometimes not having a clue is the best thing that can ever happen to you. Yeah, so the Florida division, we're talking about Creed and Matchbox 20. I'll quickly knock out Matchbox 20 first.
Yes.
At least Rob Thomas guided Santana to his biggest hit ever. So at least he's left a lasting mark, because that's actually not a bad song, primarily because Carlos Santana's playing guitar on it. So you can't go too wrong there. But anyway, Rob Thomas is the really, really good-looking guy who could make the perfect grunge faces. I mean, this guy could make the you can't see us, and I'd love to make the face, but think of that orgasmic, angry pain look with the wide eyes and the teeth hanging out, making sure that the few chest hairs are peeking into the camera. And that is what Rob Thomas was the best in the world at. Now let's get to the one that really, really bothers me. Which
he's Scott Stapp, and he's here to fight.
Yes, he is. That, and believe it or not, folks, that's an actual real quote. And I guess I'll hand it over to Arturo after this to tell that story, because he tells it so well. But okay, so Creed, named after Jesus is Lord, and the original creeds that go back then. But at least those profess to be steeped in the actual spirit of the Lord and Savior, not bullshit, which basically is what Creed was built on. I don't have to really go too much into the biography, because you probably all know it. They're from Tallahassee, which is the that's where Skynyrd was from too. And so, again, great bands, not much brain cells. Scott Stapp, of course, was the self-righteous and self-professed Christ-like lead singer who, let's just put it this way, he had the stigmata posed down like a motherfucker. I'll at least give him that. And you had guitarist and backup vocalist Mark Tremonti, who, this is another factor of that era, where you had really talented, smart guitarists stuck with horrendous lead front man in terrible bands, and then they have to kind of put their best face on it. So here we go. They were ostensibly a Christian rock band. They were never marketed like that, except when they got big, and so they were kind of the, oh yeah, by the way, we're indicative of this Christian wave. But honestly, look, which one of these does not belong on this list? Jars of Clay, Switchfoot, Creed. No, Creed. No, they're look. They kind of wore that. Look. Scott Stapp's father was a pastor, Pentecostal. I mean, they come from out of that tradition, and so really, it comes from the rebellion of that. And they formed this band, and ostensibly, I guess if you really analyze this band, you can find some of the Christianity in it, but they're so goddamn offensive, and I've said that on purpose. It's just, you listen to them and they're clearly like, as I said at the beginning of this, all of the drama and angst in the sound without any of the depth or any of a clue. The song My Own Prison comes on, and it's that low-hanging bass, that a lot of songs from that era had. and then it just never really goes from there. Now, I think Scott Stapp finishes in second to Seven Mary 3 dude for growling in this thing. So he had a very distinctive growl. I'll give him that. Yes, it did make me want to shit my pants, but it's I mean, I'm so bent out of shape I can barely talk about this motherfucker. So they come in there and look, they confused righteousness for self-righteousness, and they couldn't even get self-righteousness right. I mean, look, Vitalogy by Pearl Jam is arguably a very self-righteous record, but it's really compellingly done. And it's basically about, trappings of fame, but at least it's smart enough to get imagery from Indians and old clothings and vinyl records and stuff like that. And meanwhile, My Own Prison is, you get court is in session, a verdict is in, no appeal on the docket today, just my own sin. The walls cold and pale, the cage made of steel. Screams fill the room, alone, I drop and kneel. And, just all of this other stuff. And, you get shackled by the sentence, here is no penance, blah, 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 blah. I hear a thunder in the distance, see a vision of a cross, blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, okay, it's you're equating yourself to being in front of Pontius Pilate. Meanwhile, you're just a drunken drug addict from Florida with a shit-eating grin who got caught on tape getting blown at the same time that Kid Rock was in a fucking trailer on a concert ground. And so the epitome of phony baloney bullshit, the phony baloney, and the epitome of eighth grade poetry, if that's what you want to call this slop. And of course, their most enduring accomplishment is from their next record, With Arms Wide Open, which, obviously, the famous video, hey, his arms are wide open on the cliff. What was it? For about 2 years, Arturo, you and I would just like make that pose and we both knew what the hell we were talking about, and so, and look, and so what's there? So basically, okay, fine. You've made it to heaven. You've embraced me under the sunlight, and that, and basically professing to be the voice of God, with arms wide open, I'll show you everything.
To be fair, that song, actually, I read about it somewhere. It's about him, about his son, about having a boy, his newborn son, for the first time.
Okay, but it still sucks,
Yeah, it still sucks.
It's about it. But if you look at, okay, fine, and I give myself up to you kind of thing. But like I said, it's the, with arms wide open, I'll show you everything. And if you don't know that, this guy is actually taking on the voice of God. And, given what happened immediately after this, where, he gets in conflict with the band, his addictions get out of control, he becomes a raging maniacal asshole, they fire him, and Tremonti goes on and forms much better bands after this, including Altered State, which again, say what you want, they're better than Creed. And showed that Tremonti actually did have more to offer. But I look back at it; they were huge when the records were released. That second record in '99 or 2000 came along. Human Clay, So they went from My Own Prison, which okay, so I'm Paul or I'm Jesus, to Human Clay. Okay, what are you, Isaiah, motherfucker? It's just Human Clay comes on and it debuts at number one and sales of 300,000 plus, and it just stayed up there for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. And to show you the awfulness of the National Academy for the Recording Arts and Sciences, With Arms Wide Open won a fucking Grammy for Best Rock Song in 2001. Boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Stapp was getting in touch with his inner Diane Warren. The only difference being was that Diane Warren had talent.
Yeah, and two little side notes about Stapp. The mid noughties was really bad for him. That was the height of his drug and alcohol addiction. The whole thing with 311, basically what it was it was Thanksgiving night 05. They were in both were in a hotel in Baltimore. I think drunk Stapp thought he overheard the band members talking shit about him. 311 were in the hotel restaurant. Stapp returned to the hotel restaurant, uttered the immortal words, "I'm Scott Stapp and I'm here to fight." The members of 311 indulged. They beat the crap out of him. Hotel security had to break up the fight, removed Stapp from the hotel, and then it got on MTV.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and
there's a great Rock and Roll True Stories is a YouTube mini documentary series, and if you go on YouTube and look it up, they have a little segment on this story as well.
Yeah, which will never not be funny to me. And hey, look, 311. Say what you want about that how kind of ridiculous and stoned they were. At least they had a couple of hits, and two, they were smart enough to fuck with Scott Stapp, and so that makes me want to hang out with those guys and maybe smoke a doobie. At least in my mind, I don't do that anymore. But if I was to smoke a doobie, it would be with Nick from 311. Anyway,
and now this leads us to our number one shitty, worst, the absolute fucking worst of the shitty, fake, phony grunge bands. If Creed are officially, at least according to the readers of Rolling Stone, the worst band of the 1990s, then I'm very confident that a similar poll would easily place Nickelback as the worst band of the 2000s.
Well, not only that, but they'd be the worst band of the 2010s too. So so that is quite an accomplishment.
It is.
Proceed, sir.
Nickelback at number one. One of the most unfathomable stories and developments in rock history is the enduring commercial popularity of this truly horrible, abominable band. And not just in the US. Unlike a lot of the bands on this list, Nickelback are quite big internationally.
Yep, they are.
Now think about it. Lunk-headed lyrics that cross over into crass misogyny. Quote, "Kicking your ass would be a pleasure," end quote. "I like the pants around your feet," end quote. Yeah, those are actual Nickelback lyrics. Clumsy and cliche chord progressions. An overall sound that takes the alternative rock template established by Pearl Jam and Nirvana and shits all over it with obnoxiously macho testosterone and anti-female bile. If Kurt Cobain were brought back from the dead and were forced to survey the mainstream rock radio landscape from the mid-1990s onward, he would grab a gun and shoot himself all over again. And Nickelback would be the band that pushes him over the edge to do it.
Wow, worse than heroin, huh?
Yeah. Worse than Courtney Love.
Yeah, I was going to say, oh, Chad, we love you, but we hate you.
This sad story starts in Hanna, Alberta, Canada in the early 1990s when, as you said, Chad, singer-guitarist Chad Kroeger, formed a covers band called, appropriately enough, Village Idiot. They changed their name to Nickelback in 1995, an allusion to Chad's drummer brother, Mike, who at the time worked at Starbucks and would give a nickel in change to customers.
Yeah,
here's your Nickelback.
Yeah,
get it?
But also Kroeger in his former career was as drug dealer.
Yeah,
so that's another reference.
Nickel bag of weed.
That's the other one. So
those are the two stories. We don't know which one. Anyway, one of those is how they got their name. I will give Nickelback credit for this. From 1996 to 2000, that band worked their asses off. They could not find a label who was interested in them. Understandably so. They sucked. So they self-released their first two albums, Curb in 1996 and The State in 98. They followed these releases with constant, continual touring in every nook and cranny throughout Canada. They got their big break when an A&R representative from Roadrunner Records, a subsidiary of Warner Brothers, caught a Nickelback show in Vancouver in 1999. Roadrunner signed them and re-released their second album, The State, in 2000, generating a modern rock radio hit with the tuneless Leader of Men. The next year, however, the band fucking exploded with the album Silver Side Up and the single How You Remind Me being a #1 smash pop hit in several countries.
And may actually be the biggest rock hit of all time, if I'm not mistaken.
No shit. Soon enough, Nickelback's brand of bastardized grunge and dumbed down right-wing macho rock for white trash became Canada's biggest export until Justin Bieber came along. Thanks, Canada. If you go solely by chart placements and radio airplay, really, Nickelback was the biggest band of the noughties. 2003 saw them have another worldwide top 10 hit with Someday. Their 2005 album, All the Right Reasons, became their biggest selling album with 3 songs, Photograph, Far Away, and Rockstar, all hitting the Billboard Top 10 pop chart. They've released an album every 3 years since, each of them hitting the top 10 in multiple countries. You will not find a single music journalist worth their college degree who will say something positive about Nickelback. Nobody I know who has any decent taste in music likes them. So what the fuck is it about this band that generates such populist loyalty? Well, Chris, I'll tell you what I did. I decided to take a deep dive into Nickelback's discography by doing a very soju drunken YouTube surf. By the way, for you listeners out there, soju is South Korea's big time hardcore liquor. It's their whiskey, but it's only 20% proof as opposed to the average whiskey 40% proof. But it can still kick your ass.
Yes, it can.
And I did a very drunken YouTube surf of all of Nickelback's videos and singles in chronological order. I had to do this drunk. Being drunk was the only fucking way I could do this. And my God, was this an exercise in masochism. I could not finish a single song. Every song I had to end at the 2-minute mark. I really did. However, I did come away with something. And I think I know why Nickelback's popularity endures. I think. All those reasons I and many others have given regarding the overall awfulness of Nickelback is, I think, precisely why there is such a thing as Nickelback fans. Nickelback is essentially the soundtrack for insecure guys who think indie and alternative rock are too highbrow, even if Nickelback's music is basically a terrible imitation of alternative rock. It's the soundtrack for undereducated white trash who are defiant in keeping rock and roll sexist and dumb.
Yep.
It's the only logical conclusion I can come up with in regard to a band whose lyrics 90% of the time amount to girls do me wrong and they suck.
Yeah.
That's every Nickelback song.
Yeah, pretty much. And so, they are the kings of the incel world, even if they don't mean it. They're also, look, I mean, when I think of Nickelback, I think of incels. I think of mass shooters. I think of those beefy guys with spiked hair and bad teeth at the bar that want to sing at the top of their lungs when they're drunk and clearly headed for rehab in 10 years. And most of all, I just think of white men. Lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of white men.
What I'd like to do now is actually, I want to finish this little review of the terrible bands that gave grunge a bad name with a quote from none other than Eddie Vedder himself. This is from the book Grunge is Dead, the Greg Prato book. Okay, so I'm going to quote Vedder. This is what Vedder himself said. It took me a while to figure out how to really sing, or at least not push it. I really was a horse being let out of the gate. I was pent up. That first record, it's really throaty. It didn't mean to be, but it became a vocal style that became co opted by certain bands that I feel made really shitty music. And they weren't making those records until we, I'm meaning Pearl Jam, were on like our third record or even fourth. And what's funny, these bands, these copycat bands, the bridge would sound like Lane, the verse would sound like me, and the chorus would sound like Kurt. Or they would look like me and sound like Kurt. Or they would look like Kurt and sound like me. All this weird amalgamation stuff. However, if you listen to surf music, everybody sounded like the Beach Boys. If you get the Rhino Cowabunga box set, there are all these bands you've never heard of. It all sounded like the Beach Boys, with harmonies, guitars, and wipeout drum sounds. But here's the thing. It was all kind of good. For me, what was weird, I was just like, God, I would never listen to this grunge copycat music. This is not good. And it felt like they were co-opting the angst from whatever I had been through. I don't know anything about these people, but I didn't feel like they had lived through it. It wasn't like they were co-opting what we were doing. It was like the first record, referring to 10. They were all ripping off 10. Or those two songs. Okay, so now the final segment of this episode, of every episode really, the vault. And since we just spent a long time really indulging in memories of the worst phony, shitty, fake grunge bands, our two vault recommendations, mine and Chris's, will be the OGs of grunge, two of the OGs of grunge, as if we're trying to cleanse ourselves, cleanse our palates of this terrible music that we've been talking about. We're going to talk about good grunge music now.
Thank goodness and hallelujah, baby.
Yeah. So we're going to start with me. And my vault recommendation is none other than one of the foundational Seattle bands, the Melvins,
Woohoo.
and their major label debut, Houdini, from 1993. Now, the Melvins, like I said earlier, are on that short list of Seattle bands, or Seattle area bands. The Melvins were from Aberdeen, that originated what became known as the grunge sound. What the Melvins basically did was take the energy of hardcore punk and infused it with a heavy dose of slowed down, down-tuned Black Sabbath style metal. The result was a new kind of sludge metal that proved extremely influential for many years. A lot will be discussed regarding the Melvins in our upcoming fourth Golden Age of Rock series. That's a bit of a mini promo.
Yes.
But for now, let's focus on the band's bid for mainstream stardom.
Yes.
Hot on the heels of the grunge and alternative rock explosion of the early 1990s. Like I said, their 1993 album, Houdini. After Nirvana hit big, Kurt Cobain was very public in the media about his favorite bands, mostly of the underground variety, and which ones he thought should be heard by larger audiences. Well, the Melvins were clearly one of the bands that benefited from that, as they were signed to Atlantic Records in 1992. To take it a step further, Cobain agreed to produce what would be the Melvins' major label debut. Unfortunately for the band, and according to singer-guitarist Buzz Osborne in many interviews given throughout the years, Cobain was in no shape to produce any band due to him being totally strung out on heroin. Allegedly, Cobain was nodding out and slept through most of the sessions. So, despite the album credits listing Cobain, Garth Richardson, and the Melvins themselves as producers, Osbourne has asserted throughout the years that the album was basically a self-produced affair. Wrong credits even extended to the personnel on the album. Laurie Black, otherwise known as Lorax, is listed as the bassist, even though Osbourne has repeatedly stressed that he played all the bass parts in addition to the guitar parts. So, what exactly was produced from these seemingly distraught recording sessions? What we got was one of the most relentlessly heavy, dynamic, uncompromising metal albums ever released on a major label, particularly the first half of the album, which, if we're going by the old vinyl standards of side A and side B, is one of the greatest side A's in rock history.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
You start with the chest caving heaviness of the lead track and the lead single, Hooch, which is a song about a relapsing alcoholic.
Yes, it is.
Next, you get Night Goat, which has one of the gnarliest doom metal riffs ever invented. Next up is Lizzie, which takes the slow to fast and heavy dynamics pioneered by the Pixies and perfected by Nirvana to the next step of punishing heaviosity. Next is their cover of Kiss's Going Blind, a wholesome tale of a 90-year-old man having an affair with a teenage girl. This belongs on any all-time list of cover versions actually being better than the original.
Yep.
Next, you get Honey Bucket, which packs what would be the world-beating thrash metal riffs for 3 songs into one 3-minute orgy of thrash perfection. Finally, you get the inevitable, patented for the Melvins, slow-down sludge of Hag, which is heavier than a rhinoceros's ass. Even though Osbourne and drummer Dale Crover, the two guys who essentially are the Melvins, have long panned and downplayed the album, it has gone down in history as one of the band's greatest and most influential. Pitchfork named Hooch one of the 100 greatest songs of the 1990s, regardless of genre. Multiple metal publications, from Treble Zine to Loudwire to Noise Creep, have consistently ranked the album among the best metal and grunge albums of all time. In 2005, the UK's All Tomorrow's Parties Festival invited the band to perform the album in its entirety as part of its Don't Look Back series. In 2007, the Melvins performed the entire album at the Primavera Sound Festival. Oh yeah, it was also the band's biggest selling album by far, selling a quote-unquote whopping 100,000 copies.
Hey, 6 figures, baby.
As Osbourne said himself, quote, Houdini was the first album we did for Atlantic Records and certainly was our biggest selling record, although not so much that I could put a down payment on a new Rolls Royce or something.
Screaming Trees, absolute masterpiece, Dust.
Their last album, too.
And their last album from 1996. And here's what I have to say about that. Now, when I hear Halo of Ashes, All I Know, and Dying Days, the only thing I can think is, how the hell was Screaming Trees not huge? They may be the great lost band of that era. A band that got some short-term love for their association with what I call the Big Five, but somehow wound up as an obscurity historically and in the dustbin. There really should have been a Big Six. Now, mind you, Mudhoney would serve as the Godfather shaman in this universe. So it should be Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, Stone Temple Pilots, and Screaming Trees. Now, Screaming Trees, they captured the balls and the heavy wallop of Black Sabbath while infusing it with a woozy psychedelia, artful guitar touches, and lovely melodies and harmonies and accoutrement such as mellotrons and other instrumentation. This band had incredible range and an incredible depth of feeling that not many bands could touch. A lot of this can be attributed not only to the songwriting and guitar playing chops and the underground rock vocabulary of founding members, the Conner brothers, but also to the brilliance of singer Mark Lanegan, who went on to produce a compelling body of work as a solo artist and occasional collaborator with Queens of the Stone Age. Screaming Trees had been around for a decade before the release of Dust, which is, as I've said, is their magnus opus. Now, they released 4 albums on the seminal label SST between 1987 and 1990 that really belong in that pre-Seattle breakout canon, along with early Soundgarden records and Melvin records,
and Green River,
and Malfunction, and those types of bands. So the inclusion of the beautiful bang and crash of Nearly Lost You on the soundtrack to the movie singles gave Screaming Trees their opportunity to enter the main stage along with those other big 5 bands. And I believe they did it in incredible fashion with 1996's Dust. The album is one compelling, instantly accessible, richly textured song after another. It mixes clear Asian influences within the rhythms and instrumental choices like Indian percussion, with crashing riffs, white-hot twisting, melting guitar solos, and an aura of mystery generated by mellotrons and Lanegan's wholly distinctive, expressive baritone. Beyond the swinging Driving All I Know and the deep, dark, hypnotic Dying Days, other highlights include the gorgeous ballad Traveler, which sounds like it may legitimately be floating on a cloud, and album closer Gospel Plow, which perfectly lives up to the song's name. The song starts as a spooky Indian-inspired dirge and grows into the most orthodox but most wonderful grunge jam-out imaginable. Sadly, Dust was met with widespread indifference by the listening and the buying public, which befuddles me to this day. The album, despite universal critical plaudits, was such a commercial dud that the band couldn't find a major label taker for its planned next record. For real. And they could barely get shows. The internal strife that failure caused, plus growing personal problems, including Lanegan's Grand Land Staley scale addictions, caused the band to split up in 2000. Lanegan survived somehow. So too does the catalog of Screaming Trees, including Dust. In my opinion, an absolute masterpiece. Thank goodness.
Cold is creep deep inside. Disconnect the telephone line. Gotta get away, gotta get away, get away, gotta get away for the look on the mistake. All I know should have been, could have been mine. The last way out of this.
And with that, we come to the end of another voyage of their Curmudgeon Rock Report. We are now 14 episodes into this journey, and we are so grateful that you have jumped along this ride. We want to hear from you. This was a really touch point record episode for us, and really was a passion play here, as much as the Prince versus Michael stuff that we're going to be doing. So hit us up, curmudgeonrock@gmail.com, and visit us on Twitter at curmudgeonpod, and just tell us your thoughts on the shitty dregs of Nirvana. So with that, I guess we sign off. The Curmudgeon Rock Report will keep on rocking if you do. Catch us where you catch all the podcasts. We know you love rock and roll as much as we do. Support us with donations at patreon.com/curmudgeonrock. Find show notes and more on our Medium site. Join us next time as rock nerds smack you with knowledge. Stay rude, stay crude, stay sophisticated. Thank you for listening.